Sounds good.
When you're ready.
My name is Kate Walsh, and I'm a senior at Benilde St. Margaret's. My research question is, what are the different perceptions of infidelity between men and women, especially in the context of social media usage? For the purpose of the study, infidelity is defined as the action or state of being emotionally or physically unfaithful to a partner. In more common terms and used more common with teens, it can be described as cheating. Past research. The first theme of note throughout the previous research is that men and women have different perceptions of infidelity. A study conducted by BUS in 2018 examines the different perceptions of disloyalty in the context of gender. The research concluded that women are more sensitive to infidelity than men. The results also stated that men are more sensitive to physical infidelity while compared to emotional infidelity, while women are more sensitive to emotional infidelity. This study was the main study that I based my research off of. While there are clear differences throughout my research, I found that men and women do have similar behaviors in some areas. For example, Hackathorn's study in 2010 found that both men and women follow the intergroup bias theory when it comes to judgment of infidelity. Intergroup bias theory is defined as a pattern of favoring one's own member in their group over outgroup members. A group could be categorized as race, economic status, or in this case, gender. This means that both groups are more likely to back up their own gender. Why it matters. According to Apostolou in 2022, 1 in 3 men and 1 in 5 women commit infidelity during a marriage. It is important to research such a widespread phenomenon because so many relationships are damaged by it. This study hopefully also encourages people to have conversations surrounding their boundaries and expectations within a relationship. It is crucial to recognize that adultery is not localized to one gender, type of relationship, or phone usage, and these findings should not be generalized to every person. My study aims to address the research gap of age as well as currency in research regarding infidelity. Most of the studies that I looked at worked with adults and teens, worked with adults and older people, and my study was sent to high school students. Additionally, the invention of dating apps like Tinder and social media apps like Snapchat has shaped the way relationships are formed and maintained. Most of the studies I reviewed were a couple years old, so they did not take into account the major increase of social media usage within teens. These are variables that could predict infidelity. I'm utilizing a survey for my study. This Google Forms survey was sent out to the entire Benilde St. Margaret's High School by email. Participants were informed that their responses were anonymous and were instructed to click a box acknowledging the questions could possibly be triggering depending on their past experiences. This ensured that my study complied with ethical standards. First, I asked demographic questions like grade, gender, and past experiences with infidelity. I asked these responses to give more context to my results, which could make my conclusion more holistic. Next, I used a Likert scale and asked a series of scenarios surrounding perceptions of infidelity. The participants were asked to rate if they believed the action was cheating on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 was labeled as not cheating, 3 was labeled as not cheating but disrespectful, and 5 was labeled as cheating. Here's an example of what the Likert scale looked like on the Google form. An example of a scenario I proposed was your partner flirts with another person. In total, I asked 10 questions. To analyze my findings for the Likert scale, I'm averaging each answer for each gender and comparing the results, and the results will be shown later in the presentation. Next, I asked follow-up questions, which compared men and women's differences in relationships. One example of a question asked in this section was, which gender do you believe is more likely to commit infidelity? This design is the optimal choice because it is difficult to measure people's internal thoughts. My approach provides quantitative evidence that I can easily compare between the genders. Because of this evidence, I can draw conclusions based on the average number for men and women. One other method I considered were in-person interviews. Ultimately, I decided against this method because I felt it would be too difficult to get willing participants and the qualitative data would be harder to analyze. Another method I considered was using a heart rate monitor to measure people's heart rate when posed with different infidelity scenarios. I ultimately decided against this method because it might trigger participants and would have been difficult to get approved with my administration. The participants' gender distribution was 67.6% female and 32.4% male. All were high school students at Benilde St. Margaret's, ranging in ages from 14 to 18. The average age was 16.82. 61% of the participants spent above 3 hours a day on social media, while 39% spent below 3 hours a day. Social media was defined in the survey as virtual applications used to distribute information and communicate with others. Some examples listed of social media apps are Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. Lastly, 75.3% of the participants had no past experiences with infidelity, either cheating or being cheated on, while 24.7% did have past experiences with it. For the Likert scale results, I have a couple key scenarios that I wanted to note. On the scale of 1 to 5, male's average answer to the question, your partner flirts with another person, was 3.2, while female's average answer was 3.89. The next scenario they were asked to rate was, your partner goes on a romantic date with another person. Male's average answer was 4.64, while female's average answer was 4.92. Next up was, your partner uses dating apps like Tinder, Hinge, etc., while in the relationship. Male's average answer was 3.84, while female's average answer was 4.29. And lastly, I asked the question, your partner direct messages another person asking for their phone number. The guys' average answer was 4 even, while the girls was 4.36. Here's the overall average with all the questions and the overall scores averaged out. As shown by the bar graph, females have a higher average score, but overall the answers were pretty similar. From this, we can conclude that females tend to constitute more scenarios as cheating compared to their male counterparts. For the follow-up questions, I asked, which type of infidelity do you find to be more hurtful to a relationship? Physical infidelity was described as when one has sexual relations outside of the relationship. Emotional infidelity was described as an individual in a relationship develops an important emotional connection with someone other than their partner. Males said that physical cheating was more harmful, while females said that emotional cheating was more harmful. And this affirms the data that I explored in my literature review. Next, I asked which gender they believe is more likely to commit infidelity, and almost 80% of males said both equally as likely, and the majority of females said that males were more likely. This could be due to many variables, but shows a true difference in each gender's perception of relationship infidelity. And these were interesting results to me because my Likert scale perceptions were fairly similar, with females tending to score a little bit higher, while these follow-up questions involved gender varied so differently. Next, I asked which gender they believe is more likely to forgive their partner for cheating. Males' answers were spread fairly evenly, and the most common answer was both equally as likely for males. Whereas females, almost 80% of females said that females are more likely to commit infidelity. Once again, the answers were so different among the genders. And the last question I asked was, do you believe that social media increases the likelihood of infidelity? And 90% of the participants said yes, they think it does increase chances of infidelity. Conclusion for the Likert scale. The Likert scale concluded that people tend to label sexual acts with another person as cheating, while emotional acts were viewed as grayer. People were more hesitant to label these as cheating compared to physical acts. Each person had a different view, and it is difficult to label an act as just cheating or not cheating. It is a scale and depends on the boundaries set within a relationship. This study can encourage people to have conversations about the expectations of how they want their partner to act over social media. This would hopefully help couples navigate how the new age of technology impacts relationships and act in a way that their partner deems respectful. The conclusion for my follow-up questions identifies how men and women view themselves versus the other gender. This study concluded that women have a higher distrust towards men, which is a factor when looking at jealousy and insecurities. This is important to examine when considering relationship dynamics and possible tensions between people. Men tended to have a more neutral stance, and a higher percentage believed that both genders were equally as likely to commit and forgive infidelity. I was surprised by how similar the Likert scale answers were and how different the follow-up questions were between genders, and the results from this can back up the intergroup bias theory that I presented earlier. There are several limitations to this new understanding. Firstly, my survey provided absolute questions for time purposes, meaning there was no room for participants to describe why they chose that specific answer. This could lead to possible misinterpretations of the data because I was not able to analyze the reasoning behind each answer. Secondly, I had more women respond to the survey compared to men. If I had an equal amount of men respond, the data provided would be a more accurate comparison. This was a small sample size and does not represent all teenagers. While this could be an indicator of what other high schoolers believe, many environmental factors impacted their perceptions of infidelity. This sample group cannot represent every single teenager. Participants also may have felt uncomfortable with the questions being asked and did not want to disclose sensitive information or belief systems. Lastly, the survey was sent out during school. This means that people most likely filled it out around their peers, which could have caused them to answer based on what their peers believe rather than what they believe. There are numerous implications to this discipline or community of practice. This provided more insight as to how relationships have changed since social media. Many therapists did not grow up in this new age of technology and have no firsthand experience understanding how social media works. This study can help psychiatrists and parents understand how infidelity has changed within the new age of technology. This in turn can help them be more understanding towards their teens and give them a better ability to help them. Possible next steps for researchers could be conducting interviews with adolescents. These would give context to the answers, providing a more holistic view to the answers. Additionally, providing a more in-depth survey could also be helpful. Some ways to achieve that would be to give more scenarios and make a lengthier survey. Another possible route I considered was measuring people's heart rates for different scenarios on emotional versus physical infidelity. Overall, this topic is important to study and understand, and I hope there can be more studies on it in the future.
Thank you. Some questions? So how did your initial exploration of the scholarly conversation in your lit review lead you to your final project goal or question?
Yeah, so I've always been really interested in relationship psychology and especially cheating and just like the differences in the genders. So when I was exploring all my articles, I came across a lot of differences between men and women. And when I saw that these studies were all conducted on college students or adults, it made me interested as to what teens would think. And I believe that relationships have changed significantly with the invention of social media apps and Tinder, and just the way that people meet is so different that I thought it would be interesting to explore these topics based in the articles I read, but explore it with teens instead of young adults.
Thank you. Some of these next questions you can already talk about. How does your new understanding address a gap in the scholarly conversation in your lit review?
So all my articles were very focused on adults and college students, which makes sense because that was what a lot of the researchers had accessible to them. And I noticed that not a lot of them were very current. And I think that relationships have really changed in the past couple of years. So I wanted to explore the gap of age, where I would look at teens instead of older people. And I wanted to explore the gap of social media and just see if the answers were different compared to now versus then.
Okay, thank you. And finally, what's the most important research skill you developed as a result of this process, and how might you apply it to your future?
An important research skill that I developed was holding myself accountable to get things done, because I think in a class like this, it's easy to just push everything off until the last minute. But this class really helped me hold myself accountable and give myself due dates of what I wanted to get done and when I wanted that to get done, which I think would ultimately be really helpful for future research, because I don't need someone telling me deadlines and stuff like that, because I'm not going to have that in the future. So I think that this was really helpful, that I was able to hold myself accountable.
Okay, thank you. All right.